Welcome to the Building Doors Podcast, where we're not just pushing for opportunities for women's voices to be heard, we're creating them. I'm Christy Harst, voiceover actor and creator of the Building Doors campaign. Join us as we amplify voices, break barriers, and build doors together.
Hi, I'm Saundi Harrison-Cooksey, and I'm a door builder in the Building Doors campaign. So, what led me to voiceover? Okay, I'll make it a short story. I was an only child till about the age of 12. I, had to entertain myself. I didn't have any playmates or anything. And so I loved TV. That was my playmate, if you will. I loved shows, comedy shows and skits. And I love the news, even at a young age. I just think I originally wanted to be a reporter or a talk show host. I always tease and say that I was the original Oprah. But anyway, during bath time, I would have my TV show there and I would do the commercials. I would do the interviews. I would be the guest. I would play everyone basically. And I think I really had a knack for talking to people, one-on-one communication. At that time, I didn't know what it was, but I later learned just from watching TV. So I said, I want to do commercials. And so I just always wanted to do commercials. I think the moment that I knew it was a path for me, I think it was always there. I just didn't know how to go about doing it. I was raised in a family that I think they would think that was wacky. Like, you want to be a voice actor? Please. You need to go to school and college and all that. But I guess the defining moment when I got into it was, of course, when I booked my first commercial. And really, when I took classes, I just loved it so much. I would be excited to go to class, to practice, listen to television. But I think before that, I went to school, had a psychology degree. I was a social worker in New York. And I even then was like, I'm going to pursue my dream of voice acting. And then I later went into technology as a project manager. I think what really inspired me to change was moving to New York and just being in that atmosphere. But I have to say, there was a break from my time in New York until pursuing voiceover and when I actually started pursuing it when I moved back home to Atlanta. So I took a class in New York and it was in Manhattan. It was a very well-known voice acting and acting school. I went to class. It wasn't a lot of people in there, maybe like 3 or 4, and they kind of gave us the rundown of voiceover. And at that time, a lot of celebrities were just overtaking, just really doing the job of voice acting, especially in New York. But I remember reading, and I remember my teacher saying, it was a male, a white male, and he said, after I finished reading, okay, you're sounding black. And I was like, what? He was like, you sound black. I believe he said, you sound too black. And I was just like, I am black. This is how I sound. I just stood there with my mouth open. I just didn't know what to do or say, obviously. And I just sat down. Mind you, I was really young and I just didn't know how to navigate or respond to something like that. But I stayed till the end of class and I left. And I remember a woman coming up to me and was like, I can't believe he said that. Why didn't you say anything? I just was taken aback. I sound too black. That was the last day of class for me. So I suppressed, my desire because I listened to what someone told me, that I sounded too black. So I just kind of buried my dream of being a voice actor. I've never told that out loud to anyone. So let's move on, obviously, to the future. Yes, I took a long hiatus, because that comment killed my dream in my head and in my heart. I let it stifle me for almost a decade. So I didn't start pursuing it again until I moved back to Atlanta a few years later. And I got married and I started doing plays at my church and local theater. And I really, really loved it. I went on a mission trip and I met a young lady who's a very successful actress today. I won't reveal her name. But anyway, I met a young lady. We were roommates in on this mission trip. And she just asked me one night, and she was like, hey, what do you want to do? What do you really want to do? And I was like, I didn't really tell anybody. I had buried that dream. I was like, I want to be a voice actor. She was like, oh my God, I want to be an actor. And she was like, we're going to make a vow when we get back to Atlanta to pursue this dream. And of course I said, yeah. And of course, when we got back, thank God I did. And I started taking classes in Atlanta, and it just reignited my love for acting and voice acting in particular. And I just loved it. So my first big break was that big commercial I did for Clearasil. I had just signed with an agent, and I remember the casting email that came around and said, this has been around the block a while. I didn't know what that meant, because I was new. So I wasn't really familiar with some of the, terminology. And I remember that commercial, or the script rather, and I went back into my past as a social worker, or I really imagined I was a researcher interviewing teenagers on what they liked or what they liked to do so that the brand or the product could relate to them in some type of way based on the feedback. So I ad-libbed a little bit. That stood out, or that seemed authentic and real to the casting director, and I booked it. Because I had a job at the time. I was still working full-time, and I was at work the next day or the next couple of days, and my agent called me and said, oh my God, you booked it. They want to fly you to New York tomorrow. And I was like, what? I was like, I'm in Atlanta. And she was like, well, can you get to New York? They're going to make all the arrangements. And I was like, oh my goodness. So I called out the next day. Actually, I called my boss that evening. I was like, look, something came up. I got to go. I'm not going to be at work. I never told my full-time job about voiceover, and voiceover never knew about my full-time job. I wanted to keep them separate. I've lived a duplicitous life in this voiceover world for a long time. But anyway, they had a car come and get me. I flew out to New York, and I had lived in New York, so I was familiar. The next morning, went to the studio. It was literally a small booth, probably about the size of my closet at home, but it was glassed in, and the audio engineer was next to me, and then in front of me, it was all glass. So in front of me, it was like 6 people, and I was like, oh my God. And so that's when I was like, I guess this is a big deal. But I had imposter syndrome, I'll admit, because I'm like, did they did they really make the right choice, did they really mean for me? Because you have to remember that saying that first voice acting instructor made to me about sounding Black, unfortunately, it played in my ear throughout my career a long time until recently. So I had imposter syndrome, I think, every time I booked something, because my whole thing was, well, do I sound too Black? So that's kind of my journey into, maybe I can do this. And it was a good paying gig too. And in fact, when I got back to Atlanta, they wanted to do 5 other spots. So I got to be in a professional studio in Atlanta, and it was just a great experience. The genres I specialize in, I do everything but audiobooks. Love listening to audiobooks. I just don't like reading them. I really love all genres, and it took me a while to really continue to audition for specific genres because, again, in this voiceover world, you have to embrace your voice, and you have to love your voice, not in an arrogant, selfish way, but in a respectful, caring, serving way. So with that information that was told to me about how I sounded, I would shy away from specific genres. But now, hey, I'm in it to win it, and I love all genres except audiobook. So I love narration. I love telling stories. I love being the storyteller. So, of course, I would love to do documentaries, in-show narration. I'll tell you, one show that's no longer on the air that I really, really would love to narrate, and I believe they had a male voice. It's that show, I Didn't Know I Was Pregnant. I love that show, and it is real, okay? But anyway, I would have loved to narrate that because I love telling people's stories. I've always liked talking to people one-on-one or interviewing people, especially when I was a social worker, listening to clients' stories and their journeys was very special and intriguing to me. I love telling people's stories, so narration would be my favorite genre. So my dream client would be a network or an organization or a company or a brand that tells stories about real people, real stories about real people. So if you're listening out there, I put it in the atmosphere. I'm your voice. I would love to book a brand where the commercial is everlasting. It runs for decades. And it could be just a simple tag, like I think about that quit smoking commercial. I mean, it's maybe 10 words, 1-800, call 1-800-QUIT-NOW. That commercial's been running, at least a decade now? Would love to book that. Hello? That's what kind of work I would love to book. I think I have a unique voice, a distinct voice. And as I mentioned earlier, it's taken me a while to embrace it, especially in voice acting. You know, you need to love and embrace your voice in order to be successful in this career because it's all about authenticity and realness. So I embrace my voice. And, you know, it's so interesting because you hear your voice from your point of view or ears, but someone else may hear it differently. So when I hear my voice on a commercial or a friend says, "Hey, is this you?" Because again, I think my voice is distinct and unique. And I remember doing a commercial for a mortgage company and they said, "We loved your voice." And I remember the client saying, "Because it's soft yet strong." And so I was like, wow, soft but strong. And I said, "Hey, do you mind if I use that for my branding and descriptors of my voice?" So soft but strong was some great feedback that I've received. I think just my history, my experience working in corporate America. You know, like I said, I used to be a social worker. I used to be a teacher. I used to be a project manager. So I've worked with different types of people and different types of industries. And I think that's what influences my style because I try to relate to the script and put myself in past experiences and life experiences where I can relate it to the script and hopefully that'll come out in my voice. One fun fact about me that people might not expect. Oh my gosh. Well, something that people might not expect is I wanted to be a lawyer. I love the drama in the courtroom of a lawyer. So I always, again, it's theatrics, it's acting. I also wanted to be a soap opera star. I loved soaps. My grandmother used to watch them. So I always wanted to do that as well. And I also wanted to be a comedian. That's still on my bucket list to do a stand-up one day. So if my voice were a brand, would it be known for? I think uniqueness and the distinguished in that it just doesn't sound like anybody else, but I can manipulate it to sound like different things depending on the script. But I think uniqueness, I think I have a unique sound. Thanks for checking out my Building Doors podcast episode and for your support of the campaign. If you'd like to work together, you can email me at saundi@voiceofsaundi.com or visit my website, Voice of Saundi, to hear more of my work. Thanks for the opportunity and thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to the Building Doors podcast. Want to hear more? Check out all our episodes at buildingdoorsvo.com/podcast. And follow us on Instagram and LinkedIn at Building Doors VO. We'd love to hear from you. So call us on our 24/7 hotline at 216-307-1917 and leave us a voicemail with your thoughts. Do you want to support the podcast? Well, we love coffee. Buy us a cup through the link in the description or at buildingdoorsvo.com. Until next time, keep pushing forward, keep speaking up, and let's keep building doors together.